welcome and good afternoon, everybody. Well, almost noon. The next session for the day is the ownership of the film, the chain of documents that a finished film must have. It is the spirit of any collective creative process that many minds come together to create a work of art, or should I say co-create a work of art. And a film is no exception, especially an indie film whose essence lies in the organic evolution of thought through collective effort. However, it's the release that involves harnessing of market entities, which in turn mean negotiating money and terms. So who owns a film finally? The mind that first germinated the big idea and shared it with a writer friend, or the guy who put in the money, the guys who put in the money and made it happen? The session aims to explore and understand the process and legal documentation that filmmakers must line up to ensure protection and clarity in the final ownership of content, and thereafter to have a smooth and secure journey to effective sales and distribution. And taking us through this journey, legal expert from Naik and Naik company, Madhu Gadodia. May I welcome you, please? We have from Tulsea, the partner from Tulsea, an agency representing writers, directors, and producers, Datta, please. And we have Henrichs, producer-director of DGS. He has been involved also with the Indian film Chauthi Koot and the under-production short Sebastian and Rose and under-development features Sebastian Wants to Remember and Avni. Talking to them would be media specialist and author Vanita Kohli Khandekar. Over to you, Vanita.
Hi, afternoon, everybody. You know, this is one of those sessions which I've done no preparation for because I have no idea what documents are needed and what the legal chain of contracts is. So I'm depending a lot on the panelists here to do the job for me. Madhu, first, we'd like you to take us through your presentation. Sure. Sort of start off.
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the session. I hope that this series is helpful to everyone in terms of one of the most complicated topics that is there in everybody's mind, which is documentation. Maybe 30 years back or 40 years back, films were made, released and exploited over years without having any document, be it the director, be it the producer, be it actor. So, everything was on word of mouth, oral agreements, and they were honored, they were respected, and then came a time when there was confusion. Because, things like, oh, who would own, supposing if there's a new market of remakes, derivatives, plus exploitation over a period of time. So who would own those rights? If somebody wants to exploit an existing work, where do we go to? From whom do we acquire those rights? And sort of questions like this, which led to the importance of having documents in place, clear understanding on ownership of title, who would own what intellectual property, keeping in mind the Copyright Act, which of course lays down certain restrictions and, now with the latest amendments, certain mandatory provisions in favor of authors. So I would like to have made a very brief presentation to make this very simple to understand. So it's documentation for feature films from idea to execution. Now the reason is the starting point is always an idea which could strike anyone, be it a writer, be it a producer, be it an actor. Now to what extent is an idea protected? And how do you take your idea forward and develop it into something tangible which is protectable? So first, before I go into that, let's understand what is meant by chain of title. So if I say that you have to buy an immobile property, I think it would be very easy for anyone to answer the question as to what would be the chain of title. And that would be, the document from, inception when the property was constructed and maybe the land was acquired. From that point of time, how the title has flown from one purchaser to the other and whether each purchaser has got a registered document Is there any encumbrance? Is there any mortgage? Is there any leave and license? If not, the title is clear and the property can be acquired. Of course, subject to any other restrictions about the zones and everything. When it comes to films, I would say that, it would be the similar concept where instead of a tangible property, it's an intangible property. But here there are difficulties, there are limitations because your documents are not required to be compulsorily registered. So you cannot, it's not as simple as going to a registry and taking search and finding out as to who is the owner. So therefore there are multiple documents which go here, which includes the production agreement, the finance agreement, to every document where you may have, distributed your IP to talent, to, key writers, producers, actors, etc. And then the downstream documentation with the distributor. So it's this entire chain which will form the chain of title. So that is why it's from idea to release, each and every document that you've entered into, and if any rights have been shared with third parties, that would form the entire chain of title. Stages in film production typically includes development, pre-production, production, post-production, distribution. At each stage, you may have some documents. So again, depending on the stage at which you are, like when you are at the stage of development, what kind of agreement you should enter into. So if you're a writer, you will think that how do I protect my idea, how do I protect my development and ensure that the producer does not steal my work. If you're a producer, how do you ensure that if you're funding the development, the work belongs to you and the writer does not use your, take a leverage of your funding and then take the work to somebody else. So these are the kind of things that will happen typically at the development stage. Pre-production, again, similar, where you are at a very nascent stage and it's not yet taken shape, but you want to protect your property. Production, hardcore production, where you need to take every aspect into mind, post-production and distribution. So with the distributor, how you protect your rights. Starting with the first one, which is story development. Again, as I mentioned to you, it's an idea which eventually takes shape, which is given a tangible form. Now, there's no copyright in idea. So, if you share an idea with someone, however good it is, if someone wants to develop a work or steal your idea, unfortunately, you will not be able to enforce or, under Copyright Act, it will not give you adequate protection. However, the good part is that there is an agreement. If you share it with someone under an agreement of confidentiality, then it has some more sanctity, because courts have said that when there is confidentiality coupled with copyright, then in that case even an idea which is sellable can be protected. So we have couple of things where, there are judgments where even a thought like, a baby Krishna coming and, interacting with everyone and a whole serial around that, when this idea was shared with a production house and another production house copied the idea, courts have granted injunction to protect a property like this. Even simple ideas like where there is an elder boy, young girl falling in love, which you will see in 100 programs, but if that was shared under an agreement of confidentiality, then there is a larger protection to that. So story development becomes a very important aspect because it forms the foundation of any work, any film, whether it's television or film or web series. Again, as I mentioned to you, how do you protect your original story? What are the do's and don'ts that you keep in mind? From both angles, whether it's a producer or whether it's a talent. Sometimes the story may not be, it may be an original thought, but it may be derived. It may be a derivative work, like it may be an adaptation of an existing work where, there are reputed works, be it a novel, be it a film, and you would think of making another work out of that. Now, how do you, approach, who do you approach? Because, rights may be scattered between a publisher, between an author, between a producer. So how do you determine who has the rights and how do you ensure that your chain of title is adequate enough to give you all rights in relation to your adaptation? And of course, certain things that you also do, like issuing public notice, like you would do when you acquire immobile property. So similar do's and don'ts that you need to take in addition to ensuring that the chain of title is in order. Then again, the development of the story. So, you know, whatever work you're developing to ensure that the protection remains in the sense that nobody misuses the title to that extent. Sometimes you may have remakes. Again, the same philosophy applies, because in case of remake, now there has been a lot of confusion on this aspect, because Copyright Act recognizes two different categories of works. So one is a cinematograph film, and the second is the underlying work, which is a literary work which is comprised in a film. So, you know, you may go to the producer and you may take the remake rights. However, you may still not have the right to use that script and modify the script unless you've approached the writer, or unless the producer has that right from the writer. Now, this is very interesting, and a very landmark case in this was Zanjeer, where the makers of Zanjeer went to the original producers of Zanjeer and took the rights. And eventually, when Mr. Javed Akhtar and Salim Khan went to court, they were able to injunct the filmmakers from making the film, because they said that we are the owners of rights in the script. Fine, you may call your film whatever, you may call it Zanjeer 2 or whatever, but you can't use our script, because it belongs to us, and we had given a limited license to the producer. And the most interesting thing is that there was no document or an agreement between the writers and the producer at that point of time. So these are eventually, the case of course got settled and the film got released, but these are the kind of cases that typically happen where it's a case of remake or an adaptation. So what happened is that when there was an injunction which was granted by the division bench, in fact recognized that the writers have the rights, but unfortunately they found some loopholes, because they, you know, the producers presented some videos where the rights were sold. Salim Khan had given some interview that I have already sold the rights, etc. So on that basis, the injunction was first refused by the single bench. Matter went before the division bench of the Bombay High Court. Division bench, after hearing the matter, had revealed their mind that they are passing an injunction in the matter. And when they were about to pass an order, the filmmakers had already fought a long battle for more than a year. So they thought it was prudent at this stage to not drag it anymore and settle it. So eventually they settled it with the writers. Of course, the... Yes, it was pretty much the same script, which was modified, you know, with certain adaptations, keeping in mind the modern times. So, had it been a different script, then they may not have to approach the writer, because then you're not, if it's completely new, like sometimes you see, you know, there are banners, there are films like Ashiki 1 and Ashiki 2 will probably have nothing similar, no dialogue, no characters. So then it's completely a new work. It's just the banner or the title that you're using. But sometimes when it's a proper remake, then of course it's the script that needs to be considered and taken. Films based on true events and biopics. Now here, the recent trend, of course, there are most successful films which are biopics or which are made on real life events. And nobody can monopolize this. So if one Bhagat Singh was made, you can't say that nobody can make another Bhagat Singh. So now the question is that when you are making a film like this, you still can protect your intellectual property, because not everything is taken from public domain. There will always be some creation, some cinematic you know, effort which is put behind. So to what extent you can protect your work and cannot protect is a you know, thing which every filmmaker needs to be aware of. Typical arrangements that you have in terms of your chain of title, you need to be very clear as a filmmaker when you enter into an agreement with your financer. What rights are you sharing with your financer? What is the funding is coming in what form, whether it's an acquisition deal, whether it's co-production deal, and if it's an acquisition deal, then whether it's, or it's a pure distribution deal, and if it's a distribution deal, then whether it's an MG deal or a refundable advance, and so on and so forth. So your agreement with the financer becomes very, very important. There are things like recently I was arguing about 2 days back for a big film where there's a big production house and a big distributor involved, and the title of the film is based on the lead actress role. So there was an argument where the actress said that if you change the title, because now there are, when you make historic films, there are a lot of issues around titles and, stuff which is shown in the film. So her contention was that if you change the title, you need to come back to me because I'm playing the lead role on the premise that the film title is based on my role. Now, tomorrow if you change it, then, for example, if Bajirao Mastani tomorrow becomes something else, then the actors who've probably agreed to do the film based on the title may have a problem with that. So here, again, the thing was who would have the rights, whether it would be because the distributor will say, I have put in the money, so I should have the final say. Producer will say, no, I have put in all the effort, it's my baby, so I should have the final say. And at the same time, the actress. So, things like this need to be thought of because these are, unforeseen circumstances which may happen at the time of release, closer to the release. So things like this become very critical. I think, So I think typically production agreements, that would be with the key cast, crew, etc. And then you have agreements at the stage of post-production, distribution, and I think now I'll leave.
Perfect. That's the perfect beginning. At least it gives you the landscape that we are mapping here. At this stage, I'm going to ask Mikhail and Datta to jump in. Mikhail, from his viewpoint as a producer, he's a German producer who's also now producing Indian films. If you could give us some perspective, I know you said that there's no German perspective, it's an international perspective. So give us the international perspective, or also what it is as a producer that you watch out for, or you have, what's your checklist when it comes to it?
Well, I guess the underlying principle is that as a producer, in order to produce a film, and more importantly also at the end of the day, finance and sell the film, I have to own all the rights that make up the film. Yeah, and that is true for all the rights. So starting from the treatment possibly, going on to the script, going on to the other artistic contributions that are visible, from directing to production design, to camera, to editing, to all of the people who contribute in their own right and with their own creativity to the film. Those contracts obviously need to make sure that, and in those contracts I need to make sure that I own their creative contribution to the film. However, it goes a significant step further, because many films, and I would say any film, a documentary or a feature film, is always also made up of a lot of pre-existing rights which are just captured by the making of the film. And that may be music, or it may be visual. And as a producer, we have to make sure that we are aware of all the things we will be capturing in the course of making the film. So for example, when I option a script and when I get ready to produce a film, at the very latest, better much earlier, it is required and absolutely necessary to go through the script and highlight everything that may touch on somebody else's intellectual property, be it visual or acoustic. If you have background music in your film, somebody else will have composed that. So you either have to decide to get rid of it or clear it. You have to find the person who owns the rights. It may be the original creator of the music, it may be somebody who has purchased the rights from the creator. So your job as a producer, or your responsibility, you give the job usually to somebody else, is to track down the person who has originally either created or purchased the rights and get permission from all of these people to use their intellectual property in the film. That is something that for many films, it is actually a very big volume of work that you have to go through. So the advice is always to start this process early. As soon as you know you will be touching on somebody else's intellectual property. Make the effort to find out who owns it, contact the person, and come to an agreement that you're allowed to use it. In many cases, people will be happy to give it to you for free, but you have to have the documentation for it. And the idea behind the chain of rights is that over the course of time, sometimes rights pass from one hand to the other. So the chain of rights is also meant in a sense that you have to document that the right has passed from one hand to the other. And your chain of rights has to stop with the person who owns it now. Yeah? And you have to trace it back to the person who created it, and you have to document who owns it now. And the rule of thumb is that when you do that for any pre-existing right in your film, you order the documents that you collect to document the chain of rights in a very simple chronological order. Right X was owned 50 years ago by person A. Then it passed on to person B, and now it's currently owned by person M. And it's a chronological order in which you basically document that you have traced the rights and that you have found an agreement that you can use it. I'll hand over to Datta, but just a footnote on that, because it will come up as a question, I'm sure. Sometimes you're simply not able to find the person who owns the rights. That happens. In that case, that doesn't free you of the obligation to clear the right. So what do? If you feel that that is too much of a risk because that person may still exist and then it may raise a claim, then you have to decide that you can't use it. If it's a minor, either a minor contribution or you think it's something that is so far in the past that it's not going to be an effective problem for you, you still have to document it. You have to document everything that you've done in order to find the person who owns the rights. And you have to document that at some point you couldn't go further. And you still have to credit the person who, the work of art that you're using in your credits. Unless you do that, you become vulnerable. You have to credit it, and in that case, you can even insert in your credits that you're asking the person who owns the rights to get in contact with you. So you're actually showing your goodwill. So that's the only thing that can protect you in that kind of case. You either drop it or you go that route.
Perfect. Thank you, Mikhail. Datta, I'm talent, I'm a director, I'm an actor, I come to you. How do you help me? Tell me. To figure out this maze of chain of rights, etc.
I think with writers and directors who are actually creating content, I think that it's fairly straightforward. You know, when you've originated an idea, the producer, and rightly so, is going to ask that you represent that the work that's been created is actually original work, and that you indemnify, which essentially means that you're ensuring that whatever's been created is original work, and that you will make sure you take any liability or responsibility for any claims that might arise. So, for example, if you copied an idea and you pass it off as original, you're essentially saying when you sign that contract that I'm saying that this is an original piece of work, and if something comes out of this which contradicts that, then I'm willing to take that responsibility.
Super. You know, at this stage, I'm going to ask the audience to please, because this session is supposed to be more interactive than the others, I want you guys to have, great, we have questions. Please address the question to a particular person and also identify yourself.
Hi, I'm Anirban. I had a project I pitched a couple of years back in co-production market. The only thing that I'd like to know, I actually have two questions. One is, if in many cases, like your idea or your story, it's your own, my own, but it's been published, like in this case, it published in the Film Buzzer catalog. Does it also give me a protection? Because in many cases, publication does give a protection. This is number one. And number two is, which Mikhail was kind of trying to talk about, is if I'm using a sequence of a film as, like, say, somewhere playing in the television inside the whole mise en scène, or sound of a film heard from behind.
Okay.
In this kind of almost like a quotation. So is there any leeway of amount of percentage I can use, like in the text document, in print, you can use certain number of characters of words if you credit it. So is there anything like that in
Okay,
film?
got it. First question is if you use, if it's published in the catalog, so is it?
Well, as I mentioned to you, once the idea is in public domain, okay, it doesn't matter where it is published. Like, for example, if I read the magazine and I really like the idea, I can develop another work based on the same idea. So there's no protection, which, as I mentioned, idea is protected in confidentiality. So if you share it with me in confidence, saying that, you know, you've come to pitch a work to me and you're sharing it with me and it remains in my you know, private computer, then I'm not supposed to give it to any third person. But if it's published in a book and there are multiple readers, anybody can develop work on the same idea. So there's no protection. But yes, it cannot be a rip-off of your work. So if you feel that the threshold is crossing and it's really a copy, a blatant copy of your work, then you can initiate action.
Secondly, if you want to use an existing piece of film or music.
Yeah. So, you know, there is a myth that, you know, you can use, you know, a minimum time without going to the author or the producer or whatever, but there's nothing like that. Copyright under section 52 lists certain items which are permissible and which would not amount to infringement. So, for example, if you're doing it for educational purposes, if you're doing it for research, etc., there's nothing which says that if you use it for 30 seconds, 60 seconds, then it's protected. However, there have been judgments where courts have not entertained on a principle called de minimis principle, where they have said that if a work is used for 12 seconds, it really doesn't cause much damage. So the courts have not granted injunction, but that does not set a law. I mean, there could be a higher court which could overrule that. So I would say that even if you want to use it for a certain time, if it's copyright, if it's within the term of copyright, please take NOC or the rights.
Datta, I wanted to ask you at this stage that do you come across situations where, you know, some of the examples we've thrown up, do you come across that situations in dealing with some of the talent that you have, writers who've written that thing in, let's say they've written another films, you know, you see that in a lot of films and TV shows in India, for example. Is that something that sort of guys highlight as a talent agency or as somebody who, that guys watch out for this or your lawyers highlight for you?
Yeah, I mean, I'll give a couple of examples.
What are the typical issues, for example?
Sure.
So that, yeah.
So I'll just give a few examples. I think that, first of all, whatever Madhu and Mikhail were saying is right on. I think that we're operating in an industry that is professionalizing very quickly. And we've seen, I think, just over the past 5 years, a lot of various cases and issues of infringement. I remember there was a Hollywood studio who had suggested that a particular film be remade in India, and we thought it was a great idea. We thought it could be done quite well, and when we went and did some research, we realized it had already been done. So we were dealing with a Hollywood studio having actually no idea that one of their films had been made into a popular Bollywood film. So these are actual practical realities of things that happen on the ground. Specifically once, I'll just give the second example. We had a writer who had this brilliant script, and a director expressed interest in it and wanted to purchase the script. And when we actually negotiated on the deal, the numbers weren't working for the director, and the director said, well, what if I just use 40% of the script? Can I just pay 40% of what you're quoting? And we said, no, you can't. And the director went ahead and used the script anyways without paying anything. And this turned into a big lawsuit. Again, I won't mention names at the moment, but what helped us, and I don't know if this is exactly chain of title, but we had the full records and the email records of, you know, us submitting the script, and which had our implied non-disclosure on it when we submitted, and obviously the court ruled in the favor of our client at that time.
Super. I saw another raised hand.
How strong is an email as an evidence in the court of law? in Hyderabad, I mean, we keep sending emails to big production houses as an attachment document to the story and, you know, other pre-production documents. Is it, I mean, you know, reliable?
Just to answer your question, yes, of course, email is reliable. However, it cuts both ways, and I'll give you an example. It's in public domain. There was a film called Bombay Talkies, which got released, and where there was a case that was filed in a city civil court where the person who filed said that I had sent my script by email to Mr. Anurag Kashyap, and he has used my idea and he's made this film and he's not given me credits, he's not given me. Mr. Kashyap said, we were representing him in the matter, and he said that first of all, this is not my email ID, and the other thing is that randomly people cannot just send mails and then monopolize that idea and claim confidentiality. So, you know, I mean, he would receive, like, any good production house will receive at least 100, 200 emails. And this had become a potential problem for them because each and every person wanted to claim monopoly on the idea which they are randomly sending. So nowadays, if you see, there are many times there are auto answers saying that if you're sending it, we are not bound by it. It is a possibility that we already have an existing idea, etc., etc. So you should have a proper NDA and a proper channel to send it. You know, it shouldn't be like a random email which is sent. But otherwise, email is good for evidence purpose.
Okay. Yeah.
Hello. I am Tulsea. I am a writer-director. I want to know that I wrote a film and I directed it. And somebody comes for the sequel of the film. The producer doesn't want to sell the rights, but he hasn't got the rights. So can I sell writing of my works to the other producer?
If you have an agreement with the producer where it's not a, it's not a work for hire, if it's a work for hire, then all rights will be with the producer. Or if you've assigned the work completely to the producer, which also gives him the right to derivative works, then you will not be able to enforce that. But if you have given him a limited license to use it for one film and the rights remain with you, then you could sell your work, but not the title of the film. So if the work has a title of yours, if your script has a title, then you could maybe sell that to somebody else, but not the banner of the film.
I had no agreements, means I had no documents with him.
So that's a good thing. If you have no agreement, then the law is in favor of authors. So I would say then you could probably take benefit of that.
Law is in favor of authors, but the business structures and ecosystem is totally, I think, not very. Yeah, there was a question here, gentleman.
My film talks about influence of cinema, why a lot of celebrities died very early in life, like Divya Bharti and all. So the film has been, it has been made in a very unique way. And I've used a lot of video clips from YouTube, actually. So all the videos of, say, there are a few films videos, like, say, 1 or 2 minute clip, and also some spiritual gurus or some other clip on YouTube. So would you like to guide me on this part, if I can take the copyright part of it? There are a lot of clips, video clips, which has been used in the film. So,
you have used
but
third-party clips.
Through YouTube only.
Right, right.
Yeah.
So are you planning to commercially exploit the film?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wants to make money
So,
from it.
well, as I mentioned to you,
Yeah.
okay, because those clips are available and, it is possible that the owner of those clips may eventually, when you exploit it on a public domain or you commercialize it, you may get claims from third parties. So very simple, again, it's in public domain. There was a movie called Special 26.
Yeah.
In that, there was a scene where Anupam Kher walks from his room to the door, and while walking, he hums a song called Mere Sapno Ki Rani Kab Aayegi Tu. Now, Saregama gave a legal notice to the producers and the distributors of the film for that humming also. And we replied to that saying that, you can't, because it's hardly 30 seconds and it's, the principle of de minimis. So even after the reply, they have filed a suit in Kolkata and they've claimed damages. The suit is pending. So as I told you, as of now, there has been no injury, but it might attract claims.
Can I just quickly add?
Yeah,
I think
please.
what's important to understand with a lot of these rights holders, they have special teams whose only purpose is to actually make sure that their, property has not been infringed upon. So you want to be very careful, when you use stuff. I think Mikhail was telling me that even the Happy Birthday song is owned by Warner Brothers. So.
Yeah, you can't even sing Happy Birthday in your film. Because it's owned. I think it's owned by Disney or Warner. Disney, I think it is owned. And they'll come after you.
That's a case of taking it too far. Yeah, this gentleman here has been raising his hand.
Hi all, my name is Aniket. I am from Kolkata. I'm a filmmaker. I was looking for a concept, and then I came to a short story. When I went to the publishers, they told that the original writer is no more. I asked for the address for their families, and I went to their house. And the son of this writer is also not there. Actually, he also died. So I want to know if I want to make that concept and get the copyright, how to do that.
Is it a concept or is it a film?
It's not a film. It's a published book, and there was many short stories. Okay. One of those short stories I liked.
Okay, so since the authors died, you've rightly done the homework to see which are the heirs, and this is very typical that, he would probably have no relatives during his lifetime, but now there'll be suddenly a lot of relatives springing up and claiming that, the rights would come to us. So you may have frivolous claims. Now one is that you can approach the publisher probably and ask him as to, whether what rights are there with the publisher. Because
I asked him also. They told me the rights were there with the son. Okay. So son is no more, but the wife of the son is there.
So you should take her because these rights would flow to the heirs. So if the son has the family, then you should take their consent and NOC.
Like NOC and all that?
Yes,
okay,
absolutely.
Okay, last question.
I would like to know what are the traditional ways to research on ownership for anyone while writing a script or going ahead into production. What are the traditional ways? Like for example, like you said, for land you have a registration office to go and check up on. Where here is I just have internet and probably a couple of my network and contacts. So what are the traditional ways to research?
Well, this is a very good question that you asked, and actually there is a dearth as far as this is concerned, because you don't, there is a copyright registry, but because copyright registration is not compulsory, people don't obviously register. Unlike a trademark registry where you can easily give a search and see whether in a particular class there are similar marks or no. Here, there are associations, there are trade associations like Film Writers Association and the Guild, etc., who do certify a particular work, but they don't keep a copy of that. So you just have the title of the work. So if you ask me that how do I know whether this particular work has been exploited or whatever, it's very difficult to know because there's no comprehensive repertoire where, this information will be available.
Well, exactly that case is why I said you have to start that process really early, because it's going to catch up with you otherwise. It sometimes really takes a very, very long time to track down who's the actual owner of rights. And you should really know whose rights you are using before you go into any production scenario. And as I said, sometimes it takes a long time. So don't start too late. Put somebody on the job that possibly has some expertise with it. I mean, I don't know whether there are, whether this job exists here yet, but in Europe we generally have either somebody in the post-production department who comes on early, responsible for everything that, let's say, accidentally is captured by the making of the film. There should not be accidentally, but it happens anyway. Yeah? Or you have somebody in your production team who you assign to just really look after the pre-existing rights, track them down, and make an inventory of it. And budget in a lot of time for that, because it's tedious and it's a lot of legwork.
Thank you very much, audience. Thank you, panelists. I enjoyed listening to you and getting those questions. Thank you very much.